Let's start with some big breaking news that's coming in from the United Kingdom. Chancellor Kwasi Boateng has announced he is abandoning the controversial tax cut plan. In a tweet, he said, "We get it, we have listened." The British Chancellor said that cutting 45% tax cut for people earning over £150,000 became a distraction from the government's overriding mission to tackle the challenges facing the country. He's added that the government's plans are designed to build a more prosperous economy. Kwarteng says the government will focus on delivering the major parts of the growth package that include energy price cap, cutting taxes for 30 million people and pursuing driving supply-side reforms, including accelerating major infrastructure projects.
Mr. Speaker, the UK today has the second lowest OBR.
And for more on this big development, we are now joined by WION correspondent Ollie Barrett. He joins us from London. Ollie, this is obviously a huge development, but will it not be seen as a humiliating turn for the Liz Truss government? The Prime Minister has been in office for just a few days, and there have already been calls for her resignation. Such is the state of the British economy.
Absolutely, this is humiliating for Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister. This is humiliating for Kwasi Boateng, her Chancellor as well. Just at the weekend, Liz Truss herself, in a round of interviews, was insisting that she wouldn't be backing away from this particular element of her economic plan that was set out by the Chancellor Kwasi Boateng 10 days or so ago now. But it appears that they have decided, partly because of political pressure from within their own Conservative Party, that this U-turn had to be made. Now, it's humiliating just because it's had to happen, but it's also humiliating for Kwasi Boateng because it happens on the day of the Conservative Party conference speech that he is due to give. So it's very embarrassing for him. It was a key part of the growth plan, as Kwasi Boateng and Liz Truss had described their strategy for the economy, and it was one of the rabbits, if you like, that Kwasi Boateng pulled out of the hat during that mini budget statement to the House of Commons. It was not widely trailed. It was a surprise to many of his colleagues, but it was very quickly criticised, not just by opposition parties, but also in growing numbers by members of his own Conservative Party. And so it became untenable, really, for this policy to stay in place, and that's why we now have that U-turn that's been confirmed by the Chancellor, as you say, in a statement in which he says it will allow us to focus on delivering the major parts of our growth package. He says we are not proceeding with the abolition of the 45p tax rate. We get it, he says, and we have listened.
Absolutely, we get it, we have listened. This entire issue had become a distraction, he says, but as you rightly pointed out, Ollie, this has been quite humiliating for the Prime Minister as well as the Chancellor. The question is that how exactly does the Liz Truss government now intend to move ahead with their growth plans for Britain, given how acute the economic crisis continues to be, whether it is spiralling inflation, the cost of living, and of course the energy crisis that's looming ahead of the winter?
Well, the key element to all of this is working out exactly what it means for public spending. We know that the growth plan is in place in the sense that it's been announced by Chancellor Kwasi Boateng. We have that element of it that's now been removed when it comes to abolishing the top tax rate, but the rest of it is still there. What is missing is detail about exactly how much it's going to cost, how much borrowing is going to be needed to fund it exactly, and how it's going to be paid for over the medium to longer term. In particular, there was a lot of criticism when Kwasi Boateng announced his so-called growth plan because it wasn't accompanied by forecasts from the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility, which is normally what would happen for a fiscal event of that stature when announced by the government. We know that the OBR has been in discussion with the government and will be providing forecasts to the government within the coming days, initial forecasts anyway. Kwasi Boateng is at the moment still saying, as far as we understand it, that he will set out much more detail on the longer-term impact on the finances of the British economy on November the 23rd. There are a number of Conservative MPs and critics outside the Conservative Party who say he needs to do it much more quickly than that. So that will continue to be an element of focus here when it comes to whether there are going to be any more U-turns by the Liz Truss government. Will Kwasi Boateng in the end have to bow to pressure to set out much more detail about public finances, public spending and borrowing before November the 23rd? But as things stand, with the abolition of that one key part of the growth plan, the tax plan that the UK government announced, the rest of the strategy, as far as we can tell, remains in place for the time being. But as I say, there's going to be huge focus now on whether that becomes the next part of U-turning from this government, whether it means that Kwasi Boateng now has to get out there before November the 23rd and set out much more detail about the implications for the UK's finances for the medium to long term.
Absolutely. Could this be just the beginning of a series of U-turns by the Liz Truss government that already seems to be in the line of fire over multiple issues? Thank you very much, Ollie Barrett, for getting us all those details from London.